Okay, people, I want you to pay close attention to this picture. Well, it's better without the light. And let's try to just get it real clear. Did you know that Bill Gates is the grandson of Margaret Sanger? Margaret Sanger was the person that introduced Planned Parenthood. We don't want the world to go out that we want to exterminate the black population. What is Bill Gates holding in his hand? Who's sitting right here to the bottom right? What Morpheus from the Matrix? To keep you distracted, to keep you uneducated. But I want you to look at these names. And then look up Margaret Sanger. And again, Time magazine. We do not want the world to go out that we want to exterminate Negro population. And the minute is the man who can straighten out the idea it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members, she wrote. It was at Washington Post, called it an artfully written sentence, but one that is in context describes the sort and perpetuous allegations that feared not her actual mission. The irony is that it has been used to propagate those very allegations. Cruz's letter to the director of National Portrait Gallery, for example, quotes the first half of the sentence. An unacceptable problem was encountered. Telling me I got a problem with it, but I'm going to see what I can go through here. Basically, when you read up on Margaret Sanger, she looked at the black population as weeds. I'm sorry, my dog wants to go out. She looked at the black population as weeds that could be easily erased off of the face of the earth. So she introduced Planned Parenthood, but it was not really meant for the Caucasian. It was meant for the black population to stop procreating. And little do people know that all the way up until 1979, they were taking young black girls whose mothers took them to an OBGYN to have their checked because they're going into puberty, and they were giving them hysterectomies without the mother's consent. The child didn't know what was going on. They based it off of your economics. They based it off of the number of children you already had. And this was legal. In 1966, Martin Luther King made it clear he agreed that Sanger's life work was anything but inhumane. In 1966, when King received Planned Parenthood's Margaret Sanger Award in Human Rights, he praised her contributions to the black community, There is a striking kinship between our movement and Margaret Sanger's early efforts, he said. Margaret Sanger had to commit what was then called a crime in order to enrich humanity, and today we honor her courage and vision. Come on, Martin Luther King, come on now. She adopted the mainstream eugenics language of today. Partly as a tactic, many eugenics oppose birth control on the grounds that education would use it more, though her own work was directed towards voluntarily birth control and public health programs. Her use of eugenics language probably helped justify sterilization abuse. Her misjudgment should cause us to wonder what parallel errors we are making now, and to question any tactics that fail to embody the ends we hope to achieve. Again, Margaret Sanger is Bill Gates' grandmother. If you look at population control, back then they knew by 2022 the United States would consist of more people of color, mainly black, and that we would wake up and realize we are not the minority, we are the majority. And the fear was that we would take that superiority that already belonged to us and take the United States back. Hither we have what? A pandemic. Who is the main ones dying from this? So far, I know 3. Black women, elderly, now is starting to hit those in their 20s. Bill Gates stepped down from the CEO of Google. He is no longer the CEO of Google. He is now vested into vaccines. Now, we have a pandemic going around. I can't wrap my mind around why Martin Luther King would accept an award and agree with Margaret Sanger about abortion and about Planned Parenthood. It was in the school systems when I was in school. You can go to the nurse's office and you can get your birth control pills. She made this to deflect by saying women that had abortions were using wire hangers and that a lot of women were dying from it. So rather than go by that method, let's just take their uterus, their cervix, and their fallopian tubes out. That way, they can't have any more children. Well, that doesn't seem to be working. China had a good idea. China forbid their citizens to only have 2 children. That's it. That's all. 2. Because they saw they were being overpopulated. And by it being a country ran by communists, they had to go by the law. If you had a female child, sometimes that female child was killed. No, they didn't bother man. They didn't think that we're going to sterilize the man, which they almost did with the smallpox and the polio experiment and all the other experiments that they have going on now. We can't have no more fights. No more fights. Let me digress. Do you all realize that we're being wiped off the face of this earth? And we are allowing it to happen? See, now, and anyone can do it. Go to your Google account, put down HUD, HUD, put your name down for HUD or Section 8. You will get on a waiting list. And when your name is called or pulled, you are moved more than 20 miles outside of any city limits. I want you to hear that again. When you're dependent on the government and you're dependent on them for housing, for food, for any type of government assistance, they own you. You are now their slave. You do, you say exactly what you have to in order to have a roof over your head. Now, again, kudos to Lady Nika about mental health in the Black community. A lot of it is genetics, which means someone in their family was injected or given some type of disease that stayed in the blood system, and it traveled from generation to generation. Diseases such as lupus, which they say runs in the Black community, is very prevalent. There's diseases out here that only people of melanin get. So when you go to the doctor, let's say in my case, I went in, I had surgery on my foot. I'm asleep for 6 hours while they did that surgery. I don't know what drugs they may have injected in me. I don't know if they could have put a tracker in me, because that's what they're going to start doing. They're going to be able to track you. It could be the size of a poly seed or sesame seed, and then put it in your body and be able to track you, be able to release any kind of disease within your body. I have one now who has cancer, who was told it was genetic. Her mother had cancer, her father had cancer, and genetically, she has cancer now. Genetics are your genes, your blood, your DNA. I would suggest, and I see a lot of people now are turning back to natural herbs, because if you one day decide you want to do your DNA test, like I did on my mother through Ancestry.com to find out what percentage of what race she had in her. Then you can pretty much track genetically from the areas where that DNA comes from. Thyroid problems, genetic. The thyroid can alter the brain. The thyroid problems can make you depressed, can make you be bipolar. That is genetic. And what did Margaret Sanger and her grandson do? Get involved in genetics and vaccinations. And it always starts off in third world countries. When we invaded Normandy and we defeated the Germans were so advanced when it came to the human body, how it works, the things you can do with it, giving it all kind of diseases, watching what happens, documenting it, that the United States allowed many of those scientists to come to America, but they put them down in third world countries in South America. So those human experiments were still going on. And they learned from that. People began to be guinea pigs. And who were the guinea pigs? The ones who didn't ask to come over here. Again, please stop saying that anyone from South America is not of African descent. It just happens to be one, who captured them, two, what did that island have that they didn't have, and three, free labor. When you look at slavery, there were more slaves in South America than in America. They had to pick the sugar cane. They had to pick the cocoa. They had to pick everything that Europe didn't have. And because their slave masters were Spanish or Dutch or French, they speak that language. That does not make them to be non-African. We live in America, so we're called African Americans. They're called Dominicans. They're called Haitians. Jamaica, they speak patois. So we're now at the age of those of the elite whose sons were sent all over the United States. The Rothschild family, who had 5 sons. One had a mental illness, so he couldn't do the work for his father. Excuse me. So he sent the 4 sons all throughout the United States and South America to start this whole pandemic that we are seeing now. Stop hating each other on YouTube. Oh no, you're very curious like I am. It's only a few people. The real Yvonne. I read about Margaret Sanger about 5 years ago. And when I read it, I was kind of agreeing with her. Until my cousin told me to reread it again. Because the way they wrote it, it seemed like, oh, this is a good idea. This is to stop young girls from having children when they're not mentally and emotionally capable of taking care of children. Then when I read it again and read through the lines, I realized all of this was made for black women. So if you have some time between the beef and the gossip, Margaret Sanger, Google her. Her books are in PDF form, so you can read them, and you can read how wicked this woman was, and how this was passed on to her grandson, who says we need to get rid of about 3 million more people. 3 million more in order for America to be able to feed, house, and economically be able to survive. Food for your brain. Exercise your brain. Be prepared. Think about when you have your children going in for vaccines, you have the right to say no. Just like you, when they want to give you the flu, the pneumonia. Because as you get older, they start giving you the pneumonia vaccine. And then all of a sudden you find yourself on inhalers, on a CPAP, when you've never ever had breathing problems in your life. This is another aha, wake up moment. Peace and love.